The scene opens in the Bronx, New York, late at night. A woman named Vivian enters a beauty salon to get a manicure. She tells the nail technician she just moved to the Bronx after getting priced out of her old area. The nail technician, Becky, says the same thing has been happening in the Bronx, and she just accepted a large sum of money to sell her salon. Before Vivian leaves, a man named Frank Polidori walks in. He's the man who is buying the salon's property. Vivian leaves, and Frank and Becky finish up some paperwork. They talk and flirt a little, and then a dark figure slowly walks up behind Becky. It grabs her shoulder. Startled, Becky turns around and screams when she sees a vampire bare its fangs. Frank watches Becky get bitten. During the daytime, a young teenager named Miguel bikes around the neighborhood, greeting neighbors and hanging up flyers. The flyers read "Block Party, Save the Bodega." His neighbor Gloria is doing a live stream on her phone. She mentions that Miguel is throwing the block party to try and save their neighborhood. She also questions all the recent missing person cases since the new construction in their area started. Miguel arrives at the bodega. He talks to the owner, Tony, who treats Miguel like a younger brother. He tells Miguel he appreciates the effort, but the block party probably won't change anything. Miguel is convinced that the party will work and wants to prove it to Tony. Outside the bodega, Miguel meets up with his friend Bobby. They see 3 older teenage girls, including Miguel's crush Rita. Bobby apparently told the girls about the block party, but has taken some credit for it and promised them VIP passes. Miguel shoots Bobby a confused look, but says he'll try to work out VIP passes as long as they contribute to the bodega fund. As Miguel and Bobby walk around the neighborhood to hang more flyers up, they are shocked to see that Becky's salon has closed. They also notice that the company that bought out the salon, Murnau Properties, is the same one that closed other establishments in the Bronx. Suddenly, they hear a strange growling noise from the inside of the salon. They try to get a peek inside, but don't see anything. Miguel and Bobby are interrupted by Gloria, who jumps at them outside. She catches their surprised reactions on her live stream. When they realize she's live online, the two try to promote the block party to Gloria's 2,900 followers. Later that night, Miguel and Bobby meet up with their friend Louis, who moved away 6 months ago. Louis is reading the book Salem's Lot, a vampire novel, when his friends show up. As they greet each other and catch up, the school principal, Father Jackson, walks by. He implies that Louis is not in good company, then walks off. Miguel explains to Louis that Bobby had gotten into a fight in school and was kicked out. Louis is upset that he is only learning about this now. Outside the park, the 3 friends see one of the gangs in their neighborhood drive by. The man in the driver's seat, Henny, asks Bobby if he's still down for their plans. Bobby responds that he's good for now. Another gang member, Slim, compliments Louis' sneakers and implies that he wants them for himself. This rattles Louis, but Henny tells Slim to leave it alone, and they drive off. Miguel questions what that whole exchange was about. Bobby vaguely tells him that Henny asked him to do something, but he said no. As the 3 walk around the neighborhood, they bump into Vivian. She introduces herself and tells them she just moved to the Bronx. Miguel invites her to the party and explains that he wants to help raise money for Tony's bodega. Vivian seems enthusiastic about the idea and asks for more flyers to hand out to her neighbors. They go their separate ways. Louis is convinced that Vivian is bad news. Miguel and Bobby brush it off as Louis being paranoid, as usual. They pass by the courthouse and see that it's being turned into a condominium by Murnau Properties. This bothers Miguel. Bobby and Louis leave to hang out at Tony's, but Miguel stays behind. He sticks a flyer on the Murnau Properties sign. He hears a noise and looks up at the courthouse. There is a man staring down at him. Another man emerges from the courthouse gate, whistling an eerie tune. Miguel hurries away. On his way, he accidentally bumps Slim hard with his bike. Angrily, Slim chases after Miguel, but eventually loses him in a parking garage. Suddenly, Slim hears the eerie whistling Miguel heard earlier. He turns to see a pale man with long hair walking towards him. Slim asks what he's doing down there, pulls out a shotgun, and cocks it. Miguel, hiding on the 2nd floor, watches. The man gets closer to Slim with an evil glare. He declares that it is too late to fight back. His face suddenly transforms into a beastly vampire. He bites Slim on the neck and levitates. Scared for his life, Miguel bikes away. The vampire hears the bike and growls. Miguel bursts through the bodega door, out of breath. He tells Tony, Bobby, and Louis that he saw a man bite Slim, then float in the air. The bodega doorbell rings. It's the vampire. The young boys hide while Tony welcomes him inside. The vampire walks around, looking for Miguel, but ends up leaving. Miguel notices that the man has no reflection in the store's security mirrors. His suspicions are right. There are vampires in the Bronx. Miguel takes Tony, Bobby, and Louis back to the parking garage where the vampire got Slim. By then, Slim's body is gone. Miguel tries to convince his friends he's telling the truth, but they're doubtful. Tony tells Miguel that no one will really care about Slim's disappearance because it's normal in the Bronx. At the courthouse, Frank Polidori puts Slim's body into a car trunk while 4 men, including the vampire Miguel saw, watch. One of the men, Marcus, questions if their commander will be pleased with what happened. Frank voices his disapproval. They are supposed to acquire properties without raising suspicion. The next day, Gloria is live streaming again. She voices suspicion about the closing down of neighborhood shops. At home, Miguel's mom chastises him for coming home late the night before. Tony already told her everything, including the encounter with the vampire. Like the others, she doesn't believe him. Miguel tells Bobby and Louis to meet him at the bodega. They watch the movie Blade, a movie about vampires, with Tony. Miguel asks Louis to tell him what he knows about vampires. Louis runs through the basics. Vampires are immortals that survive on blood. Sunlight harms them, so they only come out at night. During the day, they enclose themselves in total darkness. They typically group together in a nest. Vampires can be ended with a silver or wooden stake to the heart, or with the Eucharist served at church. Vampire repellents include garlic, crucifixes, and holy water, which boils when a vampire is near. They can only enter places when invited inside. The three friends drop by the Murnau Properties office to investigate further. At reception, Miguel asks to speak to the manager about a business opportunity. The receptionist rolls down the blinds, enveloping the office in darkness. Frank appears, greets the boys, and invites them into his office. Miguel tells Frank that they need sponsorship for the block party. Frank offers them $3,000 and says their company is committed to making the Bronx the best place it can be. It is a forgotten area where no one would notice if everyone disappeared. Louis suddenly faints, and Miguel explains that he has low blood sugar and that they should call his mom. While their attention is on Louis, Bobby steals a Murnau Properties pouch. Just then, someone knocks on the door and enters. It's Vivian. She smiles at the boys, recognizing them from the night before, and tells Frank that they are great kids. The boys thank Frank for his time and donation, then hurry out of the office. At Bobby's house, they inspect the contents of the pouch. There is a flash drive that contains floor plans for massive vampire nests in several buildings. Louis suggests they alert the cops, but Miguel says it's not enough evidence. If they don't believe in vampires, they won't believe in the floor plans either. Miguel suggests they find their nest. Something else falls out of the pouch, a brass key with a skull on the handle. Miguel inspects the key, and Bobby gets an alert for Gloria's ongoing livestream. Gloria shows that construction has started at the courthouse. Movers bring in large boxes that the boys realize are coffins. They realize the nest is at the courthouse. The boys make their way to the courthouse and sneak in. The front door is locked, so Miguel throws a rock at the door to unlock it. They walk around with flashlights. In the basement, they find 4 coffins and a large chest. Miguel starts recording a video with his phone. They get closer to one of the coffins, and Miguel pries it open. The vampire who bit Slim is inside the coffin, asleep. Bobby's phone rings loudly, waking the vampire up. Panicked, the boys shut the coffin closed and run away. But the rest of the vampires have already woken up, angry. Prowling, they run after the boys, but stop when sunlight gets through the open door. Miguel, Bobby, and Louis make it out of the courthouse, but are stopped by cops. The cops take them to Murnau Properties and tell them Frank may press charges. The boys' parents and Frank have also been alerted and shout at them from outside the car. Gloria livestreams the scene, and more people gather around. Miguel shows everyone the video he took inside the nest. However, when it gets to the part where they open the coffin, it appears empty on the video. The crowd starts laughing, but Rita speaks up in his defense, claiming vampires don't appear in reflections or photos because they have no souls. Then Miguel tells them about Murnau's plans to build vampire nests and brings out the pouch containing the evidence. Just then, Frank comes out, shocking the boys, since it's still daylight. The cops hand him back his files and say they caught the boys trespassing in the courthouse. Frank gets his files back and says there's no need to press charges. Louis, Bobby, and Miguel leave separately with their parents. Miguel's mom finds out Tony allowed the boys to watch Blade and forbids him from visiting the bodega ever again. Meanwhile, in his office, Frank brings out a small chest. He inspects the pouch that was returned to him, but the brass key to the chest is not inside. It is with Miguel. At night, Frank meets up with Henny to hire his gang for a job. He wants them to make some disturbances in the area to push more people to sell their property. He also asks Henny to find what Miguel and his friends stole from him. Louis calls up Miguel with a realization. Frank is the vampire's familiar, meaning their servant who protects them during daylight hours. They agree to meet up at church that night. Meanwhile, Henny pays Bobby a visit and asks him again if he can help with the new job. At the same time, Miguel calls Bobby and tells him to meet them at church. Bobby says he's done with Miguel after the trouble he's caused in the last few hours. At church, Father Jackson warns Miguel and Louis he will be watching them closely. During Mass, Miguel texts Louis that the plan is to steal holy water and go back into the nest. Vivian pays a visit to Tony's bodega and tells him she wants to help out with the block party. Vivian and Tony make conversation as she checks out the store. As Tony reaches for a plastic bag, he notices that Vivian isn't seen on the security camera. He remembers what Rita said about vampires and their reflections. He urgently calls Miguel, but it goes to voicemail. All of a sudden, the power in the store goes out, and the call gets cut. Tony grabs a baseball bat, ready to defend himself. Someone grabs him from behind and growls. He turns to see Vivian with her fangs bared. He swings his bat, but she stops it and bites Tony in the neck. At church during communion, Louis and Miguel pretend to put the Eucharist in their mouths, but actually slip it into their pockets. While everyone lowers their head in prayer, the two boys sneak into the sacristy. Father Jackson opens his eyes and sees that Miguel and Louis are not in their pews. In the sacristy, the boys fill up soda and juice bottles with holy water. They hear Father Jackson open the door and they hide. He sees that they took the soda bottles, but doesn't see them hiding. They make it out of the church but run into Rita, who asks what they were doing in the sacristy. Miguel and Luis make excuses, but Rita knows they're up to something and wants the truth. Meanwhile, Bobby meets up with Henny and the gang. Henny hands Bobby a gun and gives the gang instructions. When Bobby learns that this job is for Frank, he gets worried, but plays it cool. Henny gives Bobby special instructions to find Miguel and Luis. Before they set out on the job, Bobby sneaks out through the bathroom window and runs off. Miguel and Luis have explained everything to Rita. She believes them and helps them with their plan right away. Then they spot Tony's bodega. It's closed and covered in Murnau sign. They sense something is wrong. Bobby catches up to them and decides to help them. They get inside the bodega and the place is a mess. They find Tony's bat on the floor and realize the vampires have already taken him. Miguel cries in regret for getting Tony involved and leading the vampires to him. Henny and his gang pull up outside. Bobby warns them that Henny is working for Frank. They try to get away, but they are surrounded by the gang on one side and the vampires on the other. Running through a back alley, they bump into Vivian. They don't know yet that she was the one who bit Tony and ask her to come with them. Vivian takes the boys and Rita back to Miguel's place. As Vivian speaks with Miguel's mother, Bobby notices her hand is bandaged. Miguel takes the bottle of holy water out of his bag and sees it is boiling. Vivian asks if she can come in, and Luis shouts no. The boys tell Miguel's mother that she shouldn't invite Vivian in because she's a vampire. Vivian shows them her wound and asks Miguel to give her key back, or she'll attack him like she did Tony. She reveals her true identity, Vivian Tyrell, firstborn of the Master Murnau and commander in the vampire expedition. Miguel splashes water on Vivian and she disintegrates, but they know their safety is temporary. Miguel's mother wants to call the police, but the boys say it would be better to stay inside until daylight. Morning arrives. Miguel starts to sneak out while everyone is asleep. Bobby and Luis catch him before he can leave. Miguel tells them that he wants to defend their neighborhood and show the vampires that the people in the Bronx matter. They agree to go with Miguel to the nest. They take Tony's bat, crucifixes, garlic, and pieces of wood turned into stakes. They use holy water to douse the stakes and fill up balloons. The boys get to the courthouse and see Rita, who wants to join them. The crew sneaks into the basement and they show Rita the nest. She informs them that the large chest is Vivian's sarcophagus, and if they strike her first, they can weaken the rest. They open it, but Vivian isn't inside. They make their way back upstairs so they can warn the neighborhood. Before exiting, they notice one of the holy water balloons boiling. Miguel wants to go up and find the vampire's hiding place. Bobby and Luis agree to stay and help Miguel, while Rita leaves to warn the others. The boys go upstairs and find the vampire's hideout. They enter and see the 5 vampires hanging from the ceiling, asleep. Miguel reaches them by climbing a steel truss. He stabs one of the sleeping vampires with a wooden stake. The vampire falls to the ground in flames and disintegrates. This wakes the rest of the vampires. Bobby successfully knocks one down with a holy water balloon and stabs him, sending him into flames too. Vivian and the other 2 get down from the ceiling. She gets a hold of Miguel's bag and takes her key back. She opens the small chest and reveals its contents, the remains of her maker. The ashes have the power to make new vampires. Luis throws garlic powder on them, and the boys run away. He shoves a piece of Eucharist into a vampire's mouth. The boys get out, but the last 2 vampires start to catch up. The one who bit Slim gets to Luis and corners him in an alley. Thinking fast, Luis gets the vampire to bite off a piece of his skateboard, creating a sharp piece of wood which Luis uses to stab him. His body goes up into flames. Meanwhile, Vivian gets to Miguel and Bobby. She prepares to bite Miguel when people from the neighborhood appear. They've all come to the boys' defense, bearing their own wooden weapons. Vivian is surrounded by the people of the Bronx. They all start to attack and fight against her. Vivian gets a hold of Bobby and warns that if anyone moves, she will end his life. She blows the vampire ashes in his face and gets ready to give him the bite. But Miguel charges at her with his bike and Tony's bat in his hand. He impales her with the bat and Vivian is defeated. The neighborhood cheers him on. 2 weeks later, Miguel makes his way to the block party. On his way, he stops to look at a mural that has been painted in honor of Tony outside the bodega. Lots of neighbors attend the block party. There is lots of food, music, and dancing. The Bronx is back to life, and all is well.